Are you ready? Serious. Are you ready? It's not only wild card weekend, baby. It's super wild card weekend. It's a weekend unlike any other. Super wild card weekend begins with 2 games on Saturday, 3 games on Sunday, and continues with a Monday night game between the Arizona Cardinals and the Los Angeles Rams. I mean, the NFL's pumped up. We got all that and more. My name's Jeremy. That's Drew. Follow us on the Twitterverse. But tonight we are going to start with saying hi to each other. What's up, brother? How you doing?
I'm doing great. Your background looks phenomenal. We're really
Up.
stepping our games up here as of recent. Look out.
And you're sponsored by DoorDash still, which is awesome. Over there in the corner.
There's probably some infringement that I'm doing, or I'll get sued. But no, yeah, we're supporting DoorDash, and we're in a Buffalo Wild Wings, so
that's badass. Good. I had myself in some random dive bar. I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to copy Drew. I'm going to go to the Factory of Sadness. Why not? But we got Super Wild Card Weekend to talk about. We got Black Monday to talk about. We're going to start out by talking about the Natty, the national championship game. What a game! Bama and Georgia. It was the teams we kind of expected when they announced this matchups and the seedings. And hey, if you watched episode 75 of the Full Coverage Football Show, you didn't even need to watch the entire college football season. We told you then Georgia was going to win it.
Look at us.
I mean, look at us. Nostradamus over here. Woo! Anyway, Bama is leading this game 9-6. And they look to be dominating this game. Even though it was 9-6, it felt like it was Bama the whole way through.
Georgia couldn't move the ball at all.
No.
At all.
At all. And then all of a sudden, 67-yard by Dalvin Cook's brother, James Cook, with 3 minutes and 7 seconds left in the third quarter, takes it down inside the 20, and then 3 plays later, Zahir White from 1 yard out puts Georgia up. So they're up 13-9. Then Bama's like, you know what? We ain't playing this. 9 straight points for Bama. Bama goes up 18-12. So okay, things are happening. But from then on out, it was a Stetson Bennett show. And Stetson Bennett just lit it up in the fourth quarter. And it's the guy you never would have expected to light it up. But this kid who, let me pull it up here. I had the notes and I got left them on my phone. Not on the piece of paper on my right. But Bennett, this kid, grew up a lifelong Georgia fan. Walks on, then leaves and goes to a junior college. He plays JUCO. Comes back and he's like, I don't know if I'm going to play. And they're like, we're going to give you a scholarship. He's like, badass. I want to have a scholarship. 5th string guy, earns a starting job, then leads them to their first natty since 1980. 33-18. Georgia is your national champions. This game, did it live up to what you expected? Stetson Bennett, was he the story? Talk about it.
Yeah, I think it did. I think we saw, and we kind of hinted to this, last week, was Georgia's defense wasn't going to get rolled two times in a row against Bama, right? And they didn't. They looked way better this time around. The football game felt very Georgia-Alabama for the first 2.5 quarters, right? Again, we're talking all field goals here. And then finally we got some offense. And then for Georgia to kind of have the pick six to really end it was fitting because of how great that defense was all year. Again, it's hard to beat Georgia twice, right? In a span of 2 games or 3 games rather. So I wasn't overly shocked that Georgia won. Again, we that was our favorite. But yeah, good for him. And he got to go out and do his rounds the next morning. And he looked like he had a pretty good night. So
he had a great night.
Georgia fans are probably barking at people all across the country. And so, yeah, good for Georgia, right? I'm kind of sick of the SEC every year, right? That's kind of where I'm at with it, if we're being honest.
We want to be sick of them, but someone's got to beat them. I feel like no one does. I feel like the Buckeyes were the last team to really lay a whooping on them. Clemson did it, but I don't like Clemson. I don't talk about Dabo.
The Buckeyes did that.
Yeah, and Clemson was a few years ago with Trevor, but it's going to be SEC because looking into even next year, we'll get into this in a little bit. We'll talk about our way too early Final Four, but looking at this game, everyone's complaining about it. Oh, this is a boring game. SEC's so good, and why is this so boring? That was SEC football, like you just said. Run the ball, try to move the ball, tough defenses, and then every now and then you make a play. It started as a 9-6 in the third quarter and ended up 33 points scored by one of the sides.
I know.
That's SEC football. You wait for someone else to make a mistake or wait for your team to get something big. And Stetson Bennett the Fourth. It sounds like such a Southern debutante name. Yeah, I am Stetson Bennett the Fourth. Like you showed up every country club ever, and you're like, oh, the Bennetts, we know them.
He's Stetson. Like the guy that wears the sweater like crossed, like from the neck. Yeah,
exactly. He's rocking the ascot when he's not rocking the sweater. I mean, that's who he is. But big ups to this kid for doing what he did.
Yeah, because I mean, it's in today's age of college football. I mean, you see how it is. You have to be a 4 or 5 star guy. You have to go to the. I mean, you rarely see walk-ons, especially at an SEC school, especially at Georgia, right? So, I was. It's always fun to see and good for them. And Georgia, I mean, that was huge for Kirby Smart. They've had their issues. They needed to get over the the hump, and they finally did.
Yeah, congrats to them for sure. And the thing is, for people who are like, oh, it was good to see Bama lose. Bama wasn't supposed to be there this year.
Yeah.
Like, we talked about them maybe not even being the top 4. Like, 5 is a bad year for them. We talked about that in our preview. You look at that team. Bryce Young wasn't supposed to be as good as he is. They've still got probably the guy who would be the number 1 pick this year. This year, if he came out, and Will Anderson, if he was coming out, he'd be number 1 overall pick. But he's going to be back next year. They're going to reload. You saw the kids that came in when Jameson went down. When JMO goes down, they got these kids who just come up, and everyone's like, oh, what is Bama going to do now? They've got 5 stars all over the place, and they got people transferring out now, and people are making a big deal out of it. It doesn't matter. They're reloaded. Yep. They're ready to come in. Bryce Young comes back. He's your defending Heisman. He's probably the favorite to win it next year if you're not looking at C.J. Stroud or someone like that. But Bama's going to roll. Who are you looking at for next year in the finals? Let's say our Final Four. We'll do our Final Four.
I would say Bama, A&M, which is kind of somewhat out there. But I think A&M is just going to start paying kids left and right.
Oil money's in.
I'll take Ohio State. And then I will say USC.
Whew. Lincoln making that big of a jump year 1, that is huge. Georgia not going back.
He's bringing his quarterback with him, right? So
yeah, it looks like
essentially that's a huge start in order to bring Caleb Williams over with him. But yeah, that would be my 4 right now, and of course it won't end that way. I'm really interested in college football to see like how Notre Dame looks this year. I'm interested to see how LSU looks this year.
Funny thing is, we talked about Notre Dame. Like, we text back and forth about how Notre Dame was actually okay to watch now that Brian Kelly's not there.
It took us to leave. I don't hate him nearly as much, right?
I'm not rooting for him. I hope they lose, but Marcus Freeman makes him a little more likable.
I agree with that. Absolutely.
And LSU, who we've loved for years because Coach O going out there, the Cookie Monster, Bayou, baby. He's going out there, and now all of a sudden we're like, it's Brian Kelly down there, and LSU's
well, I will start to root against LSU now. It's just the way that it works.
It's Brian Kelly effect here.
Exactly.
I mean, that Boston Southern man over there. But yeah, I'm looking at my squad. I'm looking at my 4. And I basically had a similar 4 to you. I had it Bama, and then I had the Aggies, and I'm like, no, I'm going to take the Aggies out and put Georgia in. And I'm like, no, I got to put the Aggies in. I'm like, then I got 3 SEC teams. And I'm like, we're talking about getting rid of some of these SEC teams. So I took them out. I ended up going Georgia, Bama, Ohio State, because with that team coming back, they should be better. And if that defense steps up, they should be one of the better teams in the country. And then Oklahoma State was my number 4. I went with Mike Gundy's boys because
baby.
They're getting a lot of good guys back. Spencer Sanders, their quarterback, is coming back. They were a top 8 team this year.
They had a hell of a season. Hell of a season. Absolutely. No, I can see. It's like, for me, it's – so let's think of it this way, right? You have the Big 12. You kind of expect it to. I mean, you don't even really know what Oklahoma is going to be now, right? I think
transferred out, including their head coach.
In Texas has been shit. I think Oklahoma State's time to shine is right now, right? I think that this is probably going to be one of the easier years that they can run through that conference. And then you head out west and the Pac-10. There's just so many question marks surrounding the entire conference. So. It's I could see Oklahoma State. They're probably a smarter pick than USC, but who knows? I feel like maybe it's just me wanting, and I don't even like USC, but I think football is better when USC is good.
Yeah.
And so it would be nice to
stay up and watch those games.
Yeah.
I mean, really
exactly. And it's really like been a fall from grace for USC and really for Texas you could include, and it'll be interesting to see how Oklahoma pivots. When they brought Lincoln Riley in, they really didn't miss a beat, but that's not typically how it works, right? There's time to get your guys in there. So Oklahoma State, I could certainly see in the 4, and it's a solid pick. Let me ask you about one team. What about Cincinnati? Now I know they're clearly losing some big time pieces, including the quarterback.
Losing Desmond Ritter is the biggest thing.
Yeah, but I think it's extremely unlikely that we'll see Cincinnati back in college football playoff. There's so many that has to go right for so much that has to go right for them over the course of next year.
I mean, I haven't looked deeply into Cincinnati. I'm not going to come out here and lie to you.
How dare you?
I know what's coming on. I don't know who their quarterback is next year. I don't know what to expect out of him. And if they get a quarterback who can play anything like what they got out of Ritter, that defense, even though they're losing Sauce Gardner, phenomenal name. Do not call him Ahmad or Ahmed or whatever his real first name is. That's Sauce Gardner, and he's a top 15 pick in the NFL draft. They're losing Myjai Sanders on the edge.
I just assumed. Listen, in today's age, like parents will name their kids like Sauce. Like it's not out of the realm of possibility.
He's the Sauce. He's fantastic. He's
I would do like anytime I made a tackle, I would do like I'm stirring the sauce or something. Like I would really just get mixing it up, Graham. Yeah. Like I like it. I mean,
like a little higher up on the Zeke scale when he's just stirring it up just a little bit, but you got to stir the sauce real.
This guy's just stirring the pot of marinara for an Italian dinner night. You know what I'm saying? He's getting the meatballs and the sauce.
Hey, Sauce is an excellent player, probably going top 15. That's going to be fantastic, but they're losing a lot of guys. It's going to be the quarterback, though, because I think that defense rebuilds. I like what Fickle's doing there, and it's fantastic that he's still there as of now.
Yeah, it can't be for much longer, man. He's got to understand where he's got to. I get loyalty to a school, but you at some point have to take the next step because there's only so far you can go with Cincinnati, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, I'm with you. And a lot of people compare him to the Matt Campbell situation at Iowa State, but Iowa State's never been as high, I feel, as Cincinnati's been with Fickle. And Iowa State has an easier opportunity because they're a Big 12 school, not a weak AAC team.
Answer that for me. So, like, I like what Matt Campbell's done, but, like, why is Matt Campbell just this sexy name every offseason? I just don't understand it.
Steady.
It's every offseason. It's like, oh, let's take Iowa State's coach who had a mediocre year, and still it's like, oh yeah, I wonder if they'll interview Matt Campbell. It's like I don't understand. There's only one Campbell allowed as head coach in the NFL.
And we'll talk more about him later coming up. So stay tuned for the Campbells. Good coach talk. But let's get into coaches. Let's talk Black Monday. Let's move on straight into this. And Matt Campbell, who's been a candidate for my Cleveland Browns 3 times in like the past 5 years. And thankfully, we're not looking for a head coach this year, even though a lot of fans want to. But we're not. Either is your team. This feels like the first time in years where neither one of us are looking for a head coach. It's like,
feels good, man. Feels good.
No GM, no head coach. I mean, you guys need an OC, but you're like, Danny's going to call the plays. We're good. But let's talk about the guys who don't have a.
I can't believe Dan Campbell coming in as a tight ends coach just ripped the playbook away and was like, dude, I'm rolling. And he actually did a pretty damn good job.
He did.
So
I think with him,
just such a ballsy move to basically tell a veteran coordinator, hey, I'm going to start calling the plays.
Yeah, I know what I want to do here. This is my squad. That's the thing. He took control. And when you're doing that, when you're the head man, nobody wants you to be second-guessing yourself. You got to be confident enough in yourself that these players buy in, and those players bought in. And that's why we're going to talk about them in a little bit. But let's get to the guys who don't have a job. Let's start with number 1. He's on our list of probably never going to come on the show. Probably doesn't want anything to do with us. Probably never really heard of us, but probably doesn't like us anyway. And that's Matt Nagy, head coach of the Chicago Bears, 34-31 in his tenure. Matt Nagy, we have ripped a million times, especially over on this side with me. I said he should have been arrested after the Browns game this year. The Bears finally moving on from him. Guy was a playoff guy. I mean, playoffs a few years. He was a coach of the year, but he just never seemed to get better. And then they also fired their GM. So the Bears are looking for a head coach and GM. Right move to fire Nagy. I'm just going to say yes. That's your thought on that. Yep. Also to get rid of the GM. Where do you see them going from here? What do you want to see them get?
Well, they're going to have to bring in again somebody that is comfortable with Justin Fields and they can get the most out of him. That's the
Urban
problem
Meyer.
with Matt Nagy. Matt Nagy came in the league, had pretty immediate success, and then people started to, of course, figure him out. And the one thing he just never did was adjust. Like he just never adjusted. He was just so in his ways. And then you bring in, you have Andy Dalton, and then you bring in Justin Fields. I mean, they've gone through just a bunch of terrible quarterbacks, but then you bring in, a completely different quarterback, right, than what they've had, and he ran basically the same offense.
Yep.
I would like to see Kellen Moore go there. I think he would be one of the good options. So it's either him or Byron Leftwich, in my opinion. I think one of those two guys is probably the best two offensive guys you're going to go get, especially with dealing with the quarterback, as both of them are ex-quarterbacks. But I think they for sure go on the offensive side of things. With the GM, I honestly don't even know, right? Like GMs are weird when we talk about like predicting and thinking of GMs. There's a bunch of GMs that'll just kind of get interviews out of nowhere that weren't even on people's boards. And those are the guys that typically end up getting the job. So I don't know if I necessarily have a great candidate for them at GM, but I would expect whoever they bring in to be on board and behind bringing in one of those two guys if they were able to get them.
Yeah,
I think the Bears situation is not really that shitty either. Like I feel like it's a good job.
I feel like you're absolutely on with this, where you bring in the offensive mind to work with the quarterback because you got to get it right there. You got to get the most out of Justin Fields. Comes in with a strong defense coordinator, someone who's available, who's been there, done that. That defense is ready to go. Robert Quinn, 18.5 sacks this year. We'll talk more about him later. I mean, Bears definitely need to go that way. And as far as who they're going to get for the GM, they got Bill Polian helping them right now in the search, which I don't know if you heard any of their presser.
Dude's 100.
I mean, their presser was unbelievable. They're ripping on Olin Kreutz again and bringing that up, and they're back and forth. We're going to have to get some Chicago Bears guys, probably bring Joseph Hurf back on, who was on with us.
What are they? What's the
Did you hear the whole Kreutz situation? For anyone who didn't know.
I didn't.
So Olin Kreutz is the former center for the Bears. He was there forever. Hell of a player, probably one of their best players. I mean, he's a center, and we have no problem naming him. I mean, that's how good he is. And these teams weren't good. This guy had Jay Cutler behind him for years and did a hell of a job. Well, he's been interested in working for the organization, being a part of the organization, which you usually want your legends to be there. And they apparently offered him a job at $15 an hour to come back. And he's like, what? That does $15 an hour? What are we doing here? Like, had a big deal with it. I don't know the entire situation. But then during the press conference where they said, hey, we're firing the GM, we're firing the head coach, is what we want looking forward, the question was brought up about that situation, to which there was a response of, well, I've learned to take anything Olin says with a grain of salt and basically bitch slap one of your better players in your organization over the past 10, 15 years, and it looks like a mess. Let's see what the Bears do going forward. There's a lot of great – Louis Riddick is a guy I think should get a look at there.
Yeah, I'm also whatever with Louis Riddick, right? Like,
I mean, I think Louis Riddick being on Monday Night Football is throwing us off for what he really is, because he's got to be behind Brian Griese, who I can't stand on Monday Night Football.
I actually think it's in his benefit that he's on TV, because I think that he sounds extremely intelligent and sounds like he has a plan. Well, let's not forget he was in the league. There's a reason he left the league. There's a reason nobody wanted him at that point. I'm not saying he couldn't adapt and be a better candidate. Yeah. But he's one of those sexy names that like, right? Like, I don't necessarily like a guy like Brad Holmes isn't like a guy A guy like John Dorsey's a guy like, you know what I mean? Like, there's some GMs that are like that, and then there's some not. And so I just think that people potentially have too high of expectations for what he could be as a GM.
I mean, he's a guy to look at. I think he does have GM capabilities, smarts, and as far as how he would want to build a team, I don't know if that works. We'd have to see that in an interview. Jeff Ireland's a guy who keeps getting brought up. He's another retread. How about a guy like Elliott Wolf? His dad, Ron Wolf, excellent in the NFL. He's working behind John Dorsey. Now he's working for the Patriots. Guys like that are people we're going to look at. Maybe, even Will McClay is a name that I think every team needs to look at. I mean, he's a third guy basically in the triumvirate of the Dallas Cowboys. Been there forever. They've always had solid drafts. They've always had okay teams. They haven't won since the 90s, really, but they still always build a roster. They always find stars. Will McClay's a guy to look at. I think Will McClay and the pairing with Kellen Moore would be phenomenal for Chicago.
It would make sense, right? It would
Yep.
make sense that they can kind of come as a package deal, both familiar with each other. And yeah, I'm with you on that.
All right, let's move on. Denver, 19-30 record for Vic Fangio before he was fired. Thing for him, this guy had a great defense there. They put weapons around quarterbacks. They just never had a quarterback, and he kind of said that in his season-ending presser. So where does Denver go here? What do you expect them to do? Is it an offensive guy? Do they bring in another defense guy? Or does none of this matter until they actually find a damn quarterback outside of Drew Lock?
Well, that's the answer. I mean, John Elway was gifted Peyton Manning, and since then he can't find anybody even competent to play the position. And you know as well as I do, you can have all the fancy defensive players, the fancy weapons offensively. You can have all that. If you don't have a quarterback, it just doesn't matter. I think we're well past the age of like mediocre quarterbacks winning Super Bowls, like your Trent Dilfers and things like that. That like defense helps win championships, but the way that this league is set up in the passing league that it is, you have to have the quarterback. Otherwise, it's irrelevant. If I were to guess, Eric Bieniemy would be my choice for Denver. I'm not necessarily sold that they go one way or the other, whether it's offense or defense. I just think they need to find the right guy. Again, what good is it going to do to bring in Byron Leftwich when you have nothing at quarterback?
Yep.
I mean, of course, that they have the opportunity to draft somebody and try to kind of mold them along. But in Denver being the organization they are, I would expect them probably to lean more on the defensive side than the offensive side, because I feel like that's kind of what, outside of Peyton Manning way back in the day of John Elway, it's kind of what they were built off of.
Yep. I'm with you on that, but this is the team where I feel like they could hire a Dan Campbell type, where it doesn't matter either side of the ball. Dan Campbell's known for offense. It's where he played. It's where he mostly coached. But a guy who they need a leader in there, just a flat out leader to get the best out of what's left there, because they still have you look at Patrick Surtain, probably candidate for defensive rookie of the year, even though we all
still
know
have Bradley Chubb. I know he's been banged up.
Yep.
And I mean, an elite pass rusher when healthy. There's plenty of good there.
Solid in the back end. There's a lot of stuff, so they can go either way. They just need to find that quarterback. And if I was going to guess, I like Eric Bieniemy there as well. That's a guy I could definitely see, because he knows the division, knows what it takes to win there, and he's got a great record with Patrick Mahomes. Maybe that's something that
this has to be the year Bieniemy gets a job, right? Like, because it's been 2 years now, right? Well, 2 years prior to this, where it's like, okay, Eric Bieniemy interviewed a bunch of times, no job. Eric Bieniemy interviewed a bunch of times, no job. Like, eventually, he's got to get a job, especially for what he's been able to do in Kansas City. So I don't know. I think I would agree with you. That's a good fit.
All right, let's move on to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Let's talk about the Jags for a second. What a ending to the season they had, knocking out
Bill O'Brien.
Bill O'Brien. You're going, Bob. They interviewed him today, knocking the Colts out of the playoffs and setting up just
have a week, Jackson.
Carson Wentz to just look pathetic. 4.4 QBR, and I know we
don't
say a lot about the QBR, but that's not good. That's barely better than you and I would have done.
Right. I actually wouldn't have. I would have been too terrified to even throw the ball. So I would have had no turnovers. I would have just snapped it and laid on the ground in the fetal position.
I would have done great handing that ball to Jonathan Taylor and throwing quick screens, and that's about it. But
yeah, no, disaster for Indy. I thought they would actually be a somewhat difficult out in the postseason as well with their ability to run the ball. But just I think a classic case of just overlooking a team.
Yep.
Right? Like, they had their eyes on the postseason, and listen, it's the NFL. I mean, the Jags are a trash organization, but I mean, fuck, their fans were dressed up as clowns.
You lost to a team with clowns in the stands.
Yeah, like, I mean, so it has to be like a case. I mean, they were just bad. They actually got their ass beat, is what they did. So yeah,
it was ugly.
Jacksonville was an interesting one.
I mean, the cupboard isn't bare there. They've got talent. The defense, when it plays up to par, they're scary good. That pass rush is something. And they've got a chance to add another hell of a pass rusher, even though I don't think they're going to go that way as of now. But for this team, I look, and what they really need is an adult. The problem is they have Trent Baalke as your GM, and he's not going to let them bring in an adult. I don't see him really being okay with a Brian Flores or a Doug Peterson or someone who's been there and done that, maybe even Bill O'Brien. I don't see it. Maybe they're interviewing him, but I don't see Trent Baalke actually doing that because I feel like he's the guy who feels he needs the power and he can't stand up to anybody
Right.
who's had the power before.
It's a great point.
And that's why you could see the interim and Daryl Bevell taking that job at some point. But for this organization, the best thing for him, listen, Bill O'Brien, we make fun of him all the time. Bill O'Brien, the GM, got Bill O'Brien, the head coach, fired. Because as a pure head coach, he wasn't awful.
Listen, he traded DeAndre Hopkins for David Johnson. He should be banned from the league.
Of David Johnson.
Should be banned from the league in its entirety.
I mean, the GM got him fired. Brian Flores, who we'll talk about in a second because we're going to bring up Miami, I think he's a great fit there because an adult, like we said. But do you see it? What do you see them actually doing here?
I mean, could you see him looking at like Greg Roman? I think it's an interesting name.
Maybe.
I think Doug Peterson would be an adult in the room. I know people have mixed feelings about Doug Peterson.
Doug Peterson won a Super Bowl with Nick Foles.
Yeah, he sure did. And he won it with Big Dick Nick.
Swinging it back and forth through the Philly special, baby.
It's an interesting name. I mean, who are the offensive coordinators that would really, I think, of course, Kellen Moore and then Byron Leftwich. I mean,
Greg Roman's a good look. I mean,
who was it in this LA? Kevin O'Connell, potentially. Because I think that those candidates, as compared to, so like, I think a Greg Roman or Kevin O'Connell are two guys where he'll still be able to have that power structure that fits kind of where he's at. Where if you bring in Doug Peterson ain't playing that shit.
No.
Bill O'Brien is not. Bill O'Brien is a crazy person.
Bill O'Brien will fight Trent Baalke.
Bill O'Brien will be GM in like 2 weeks. He'll come in as head coach and he will take over control of player personnel.
Then it's over. I mean, there might be only one worse GM than Trent Baalke, and that's Bill O'Brien.
Yeah, so I mean, I could see him going one of the coordinator routes. Those are just a couple names. I think Kevin O'Connell's the offensive coordinator.
Kevin O'Connell, yeah, he was here. He was in Cleveland as a quarterbacks coach. I believe with Kyle Shanahan under Mike Pettin at one point. I don't know. There's been so many coaches.
What if Brian Flores just moves down the road?
That'd be interesting. I could see that. I mean, it fits, and he's not necessarily the same power as Bill O'Brien. He's not the same established guy. He's middle.
He's not the fresh off OC that hasn't had a job. He's the guy right there in the middle. That's not a Doug Peterson. He's not a Bill O'Brien. I think, it's a good point.
And if you're Flores, you look at that defense and the fact you got Trevor Lawrence, who played like a number one pick in that last game, why not? But a name I did want to bring up there is Mike LaFleur. Right now, he's the offense coordinator in New York with the Jets. His brother, obviously, Matt LaFleur in Green Bay. He's got the Shanahan touch. He's got the Matt LaFleur touch. I mean, he's got all the little pieces that all these guys want. Is that a guy you could see possibly getting a look at for this job?
Yeah, it's another interesting name. I don't know. I haven't actually seen who they've lined up for interviews at this point. Have you?
Peterson and it was Bob today, obviously, with Bill O'Brien.
Well, yeah.
And I think Jim Caldwell is also on the list. That's another adult in the room that I just can't see Trent Baalke doing. And people who are knocking Jim Caldwell, 67 years old, I get that. But look, Bruce Arians won a Super Bowl last year at 68. He's 69 this year. Nice. Pete Carroll's 70, a young-looking 70, because I always think he's younger than, like, the hoodie. The hoodie's up there at 67. I mean, there's still guys who can coach up in this league. If you can coach and you got coordinators who can do the dirty work for you, it doesn't matter. And I think the thing about Jim Caldwell is he can come in, be the adult in the room, and be everything they expected Urban Meyer to be at one point. So let's move on. Let's move to the team that just fired their head coach yesterday after there were reports they might be keeping him, and we thought there's no way they could sneak this guy under the rug and keep him, but they didn't. Joe Judge, who Sunday ran
I feel like
back-to-back quarterback sneaks from the opposite end of the field that you would run a quarterback sneak just to set up a punt in a game that didn't matter, in a game where you're starting Jake Fromm, in a game that show some balls, go crazy, do what Dan Campbell did with the Lions against the Packers, do something to show you have a set of huevos. Instead, Joe Judge basically is like, we're just going to play to not really get hurt. And then their general manager, they let him retire. They didn't have enough cap space to add players for the final game of the year. This team, they need a head coach. They need a GM. Joe Judge, 10-23 in a couple years. This team, I mean, I feel like the Browns took the baton and handed it to them as the most messed up franchise in the league right now after the Odell Beckham trade. It was like they traded Odell Beckham for the baton for the worst franchise in the league. But this cupboard isn't bare either. They've got some talent in spots. They're not great. The offense is a joke, and you have a guy in Kenny Golladay who caught 0 touchdowns at a $75 million contract. What do they do here?
Yeah, so for that it's tough. So they had to, of course, fire him. I mean, when they went QB sneak on 3rd and 9 while getting beat.
Hey, it was only 3rd and 9 because they ran a QB sneak on 2nd and
right.
2nd and 10.
Real confident. And I get Jay Fromm's playing, but yeah, it seems like they made a multitude of bad decisions free agency wise in the offseason, leading that with Kenny Golladay, who had 0 touchdowns, to your point. So they're definitely going to have to bring somebody in. Is Daniel Jones the guy? I'm not so sure about that. So, I mean, I'm not sure this is a Brian Flores destination, but it sure could be. Mm-hmm. I do think that Brian Flores gets hired, and we're running kind of out of teams here. So if I'm going to stick my head out and say that, I will say that the Giants will go that way, and go from there. You know what I mean? Like, It's that simple.
I think the Giants are a great spot for a guy like Doug Peterson.
Interesting. Go back to the division.
Same division, but he's won a Super Bowl. And, yeah, he wasn't perfect in Philly. But that team, that roster, they didn't get – I mean, you look at what they had as far as weapons when he was leaving. They weren't good. And they've slowly rebuilt them. They finally got a quarterback maybe in Jalen Hurts. But he's going to run into those same problems. Can he work through it? But they need someone who's not going to go in there and just bullshit the New York media the entire time, or any media, by saying everyone wants to come here. Anybody who's played here says they'd come back for $4.38 and give up $38 million.
Go back for the Olin Kreutz contract.
Yeah, that's what they're going to bring guys in at $15 an hour because that's all the cap space they have.
Yeah,
this team they need a full rebuild, and they need someone who can work through it.
I agree.
Because maybe Saquon, it's time to move him. Do you re-sign him because that contract's coming up?
No.
I mean,
no.
What do you do? There's so much to fix. And I think the general manager is the biggest thing. Find a guy who has a clear vision and a precise vision to what to do, not just for next year, but for the future of your franchise. I'm not going to go out and name guys. I think Elliott Wolf would be perfect in this spot. Young guy, first job, but the spotlight isn't too big for him. I've seen him here. I saw him in Cleveland. John Dorsey, they'll talk about John Dorsey there. John Dorsey doesn't need to go there because John Dorsey's going to want to make a splash. You need a guy who's going to go in there and build slowly, a guy who's worked under Ron Wolf, a guy who's worked under John Dorsey, a guy who's worked with Bill Belichick, someone like that. Maybe even Thomas Dimitroff would fit here as a guy who can rebuild rosters and knows what it takes. I would like to see that. And as far as head coach, go from there.
I agree.
But get the adult in the room.
They have to. Like, I think they're one of the I do think it's one of the worst jobs out there.
It is. And it sucks because they've always been a huge great franchise, it feels like, for the most part, but they've always had quarterbacks. And maybe this is a spot even for a guy like Dan Morgan. You know, the Panthers, I think he's the assistant general manager there, but he was a great player for a long time. Maybe a guy who just knows what it takes to rebuild, something like that. We'll see. Let's go back to another team, head coach and GM, and that is the Minnesota Vikings. They let go Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman, 72-56-1. Zim,
he was mediocre.
He's not a bad coach.
No,
but he's not.
The record was just mediocre.
They just never got over the hump, and maybe it's because their quarterback was never that guy to win. He was just that guy to put up stats, which it still looks like he is. And there's a lot of people, including Sage Rosenfels, who you have to check out his Twitter feed at Sage Rosenfels. I think he's been ripping Kirk Cousins all week as a guy who can't win. And I mean, he's not wrong. Kirk Cousins puts up great stats, but that's where Spielman and Zimmer put their horse. They're like, he's our horse. We're hitching our wagon to him, and nothing happened. This is a team where I think one of the three guys working under Jason Light, I can't think of the names. I don't have my notes in front of me for that. one of Tampa's front office guys, I think perfect to fit up there. Go in there and bring in a guy who it's got to be offense. Maybe Byron Leftwich comes with him. I could see the Tampa package head this way. Eric Bieniemy would fit great up here. This is a team that can win. They got to fix the defensive side of the ball. They're going to lose Clint Kubiak, who's probably going to go to Carolina as their OC. But there's so much power on offense, even with a quarterback who's not winning games. Maybe you rein him in a little bit. Maybe you get him to just be dink and dunk Kurt and get the ball to the playmakers and work from there. But I feel like really you got to figure that out first. Is he worth that 35 to 45 million next year? What do you do there? It's the GM, and then everything goes from there. What do you see the Vikings doing?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. I think that as far as the organization, it's structurally somewhat sound, right? Where there's a few of these other organizations, the Giants, the Jaguars. I mean, it's just an absolute disaster that you're kind of walking into. So I do think that you have a head start already. You still have a Dalvin Cook. You still have Kirk Cousins. You still have Justin Jefferson. So there's a lot of good there. I think you bring in a defensive guy. As much as you like what they did offensively, I would look at somewhat as a DC. I don't know. Maybe they do bring in Byron Leftwich, though. It's very interesting to think that it's one of those. You got to find somebody that's excited and thinks that they can turn up. I don't want to say turn around Kirk Cousins because he's not bad, but like get him over the hump, right?
Yeah, push him to the next. And I get it, he's on the downside of his career now, but you can push that guy over the hump to teach him how to win football games.
And they still have weapons, right? They lost a lot of tight football games this year. I love Byron Leftwich going there, but we'll see. I just don't even know which way the Vikings go. Like, it's so interesting to me. That's going to be the best one because that may be the best job, right? I think it probably is the best job. So I'll be extremely interested to see what shakes out there. I don't know if that. I mean, Doug Peterson is like Mike Zimmer, right? Like the same personality wise, I think. So I don't know. I don't know which way the Vikings go, to be honest with you.
I think it all starts with the GM and the guy that he feels fit with. And the reason this is probably the best job, especially for the GM, it is because the Wilfs, they leave their guys alone and let them work. Spielman was there forever. And Spielman drafted a lot of really good guys. They were never able to get over the hump because they never found that perfect quarterback to help them. You win in this league with the quarterback, unless you have an unbelievable defense, unless you are an amazing head coach, i.e. John Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin, who somehow got their teams to where they are. We'll talk more about them later. But this job, probably the best out there. Let's move on. Dolphins, let's just get to them because we've talked Brian Flores. Brian Flores, 9-8 this year. They started out, 0-7, won 8 in a row. I mean, yeah, he started out terrible, turned it around. Brian Flores seemed to be, and I jokingly called him the Black Jeff Fisher a couple weeks ago, but he just always gets his team to at least be competitive and average, whereas some guys just collapse, i.e. Joe Judge. And Flores is a guy, we've already talked about it in the past 20 minutes here, that he's going to get another job. He deserves it. And it's because of what he did in that organization. They took a team that was tanking for Tua. They got Tua. And they were able to do things with Tua or with whoever was at quarterback, with Fitz, with give me anybody they had, and they were able to win ball games at some point. But for all the people who said, oh, look what he did against Bill Belichick, 2-0 against Patriots this year, he was 0-6 against Sean McDermott. He does have his warts. They had their issues. But for them to fire Brian Flores, there had to be something bigger there, and Chris Greer not getting along with him.
Yeah.
I get it, but I would have fired Chris Greer if it came down to it because Greer's missed on a ton of draft picks, which leaves your team where they're at right now is just average. And where do they go from here? Who's going to come in there and do any better than what Brian Flores did? You bring in a guy who you think can really mentor Tua to get Tua to not be the young Ben Roethlisberger?
So here's the interesting thing with Miami is it the organization that's not sold on Tua? Was it Brian Flores that wasn't sold on Tua? Because clearly they've been in every trade discussion surrounding Deshaun Watson. Mm-hmm. So somebody in that organization does not believe in Tua, and maybe rightfully so, right? But so they're going to have to find somebody that does, in my opinion, or they finally bite the bullet and trade for Deshaun Watson. But I think one of the main reasons Deshaun Watson wanted to play in Miami is because of Brian Flores.
Yep.
So now that's out the window. I would love to see, and you brought up Jim Caldwell earlier. I think this would be a perfect spot for Jim Caldwell. I think that the roster has some talent, but he's a stable guy, right? Like he's not a too high, too low guy. He's kind of a bring your lunch pail to work kind of dude. And I think that would be beneficial for Tua. And I really think that he's an adaptable head coach to kind of whoever he has, he can make it work. That would be my pick for Miami, but I'm still surprised with the Brian Flores firing, but it sounds like, from what I've read, him and Tua got into it multiple times.
And we get it.
The situation just wasn't great.
We talked about Miami as losing a ton, and then the trade deadline stopped, and then all of a sudden Tua plays better, and they rail off those 8 wins.
Right.
Obviously, that had an impact on the organization. But is that on Tua? Is it on Flores, or is it on the organization letting that leak out and also not pulling the trigger on the deal when they had the chance? I mean, the organization's a mess. If ranking jobs, this is barely better than the New York Giants.
Yeah,
that's just because they have better players.
Think of it this way. I mean, you still started 0-7, right?
Yep.
Like, we don't just erase what happened. And if you look at the teams they beat in the stretch of 7 or 8 games, whatever it was, I believe it was 7. They just played really bad football teams. Granted, they won. Granted, Tua was phenomenal as far as accuracy is concerned. But for me, it's just hard for this team because with the disconnect between Tua, I feel like it's tough on Tua because it seems like, if any camp were to leak it, you would think it would be Tua's camp to leak something like that. But it's like, it's hard for Tua because it feels like, nobody's committed to the kid. I mean, since he's been in the league, it's been constantly talked to Sean Watson. Then you find out he's fighting with his coach. It's like, when we find out about that kind of stuff, it makes me think, what else is there, right? What else is going on? Because it just doesn't start and end like that. There's deeper problems that are running through the organization. And to your point, if you fired Greer at that point, that's kind of clear. I mean, if you want to fire Flores, do it too. But like, if we have we have issues in the organization, you start from the top and you just take them both out and you just say, hey, we're going to start back over. We thought we had something good. It didn't turn out that way. And we're just going to pivot and move on.
So something like that make you think maybe with Brian Flores and Tua arguing that maybe there's a reason Brian Flores is out and maybe that keeps him from getting another job right away.
Certainly is a possibility. I mean, there definitely has to be, that is the reasoning I would think that he's out. I mean, record wise, he's done enough with the roster the way it's currently assembled to retain that job, in my opinion.
Yeah. The amazing thing though is I sent this stat to you earlier, and it's the most bizarre thing, analytic wise. I guess we'll call this analytics. The Miami Dolphins finished the season 9-0 versus QBs who have an O in their name or in their last name, and 0-8 against QBs who don't have an O in their name. So Mac Jones, they beat. Then they lost to Josh Allen, Derek Carr, Carson Wentz, Tom Brady, Trevor Lawrence, Matt Ryan, and Josh Allen. But then they got all the O's. They beat Tyrod Taylor, Lamar Jackson, Joe Flacco, who's got a lot of O's, Cam Newton, Mike Glennon and his long neck, Zach Wilson, Ian Book, and then they lost to Ryan Tannehill, and then they beat Mac Jones. What a bizarre stat. And for people how do you notice that? It's insane. But let's move on to the final job opening. And I don't know if it's really a job opening because, I always say you never hire the interim, ever. The interim, they got nothing to lose. They coach. But look at the job Rich Bisaccia has done there for the Raiders. They're in the playoffs. They play 4:30 Saturday against the Bengals in the jungle with Kay Adams going, hey, Kay, how you doing, lady? I might go down to Cincinnati. What up? But anyway, Raiders 10-7, all the crap they went through with the emails and Gruden and DUI after DUI and Henry Ruggs, who just a jackass. And Bisaccia kept them in it and then got him in the playoffs. Is this going to be a head coach opening, or do you give the job to Bisaccia at this point?
I think you would hire John Gruden. It'd be the route I would go. I actually think that Bisaccia deserves to at least have consideration.
He definitely does.
This reminds me of kind of, if you want to rewind to Cleveland in the year Greg Williams took over.
Yeah.
as interim. There was a lot of people around here that wanted Greg Williams to be retained as the head coach. I think that you could make the argument that the Raiders have more reasoning to bring him back than the Browns did. I mean, if they win a game, if they win a playoff game, I think you have to consider it, because clearly with all the extra baggage and drama surrounding the organization, for them to even be where they are is pretty impressive. Derek Carr to have the year he did, 4,800 yards, 23 touchdowns. Excuse me.
He threw for a lot of yards, but still, it was just a 23 touchdowns. It feels like they're always getting close to the red zone. They're never really capitalizing. But they still
bro,
did just enough.
They're a 20-20 team, dude. They're inside the, like, once they get inside the 20s, it's again, once you get into the condensed areas like that, you know how it is. It's just a lot harder because the field gets smaller. And one of the blessings has been what Hunter Renfrow and his route running does.
Incredible player right now.
Yeah, but because for him to be able to do what he does inside the 20s and just kind of run the route so well, that's been beneficial to him. But you're right. They don't put it in the end zone often enough. But keep in mind too, not only with the rug shit and in the DUIs, and then you throw in Darren Waller missing considerable time. Like, the team's gone through a lot. And I definitely think that what's that?
They were without Josh Jacobs for a bit. I mean,
yeah. I absolutely think that he deserves a shot, and I don't know out of the coaches we've talked about which one, like, I would even see fitting there, right? And I know we've brought up a handful of names, but like, maybe it feels right for the interim to take it for a year and then kind of go from there.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Bisaccia definitely deserves the biggest look, but this is the one spot where a guy we haven't even mentioned yet, but a guy I think could end up in the NFL again for sure. That's Jim Harbaugh. This is a spot where, the Raiders love to make the splash. Mark Davis loves to make a splash with everything except for his freaking haircut. Just keep the same old bowl around his fucking head. God damn, that's you got $1 billion. Do something with that goddamn rug on your head.
I love him for it, dude. He's like, whatever. I'm rich as hell. I'm just gonna look like this.
Just rubs money on his head. Oh, you don't like the hair? Here you go. Here's 100. But anyway, this is a Jim Harbaugh spot if it's not Bisaccia. But, man, Bisaccia has been the adult in the room. We talk about that multiple times. Got to be the adult, and he's done it. He's kept them steady. And he's not a guy for either side of the ball. He's been a special teams coach. Been around the league forever. But is it that interim thing where it's just he didn't really have the pressure on him? Did he just coach a certain way? Is it going to change? Or is this just who he is? That's what they got to figure out.
Freddie Kitchen.
Yeah, that's the Freddie Kitchens factor. I mean, Freddie Kitchens had no issues.
Bro, Freddie Kitchens went from ball boy to a head coach in like 2 days.
And I love
literally, I've never seen somebody ascend up the ladder like that.
I mean, you're like, oh, you're a position coach? Hey, you're an interim OC, head coach.
Yeah.
And it's because people spend too much time thinking who can work with the quarterback. And that's why I think you really need to find adults in the room who can work out things, who can just manage the entire team. And that's why I give Dan Campbell all the credit I give him for what he's done in your organization. We're about to get to him. Let's move on. We talked about the Black Monday. We've talked about the Natty. We've moved on to now the regular season is over. Let's talk regular season awards. Let's talk MVP. I got 5 guys written down as MVP worthy. That is Aaron Rodgers,
dude.
Tom Brady. MVP. What? I heard this MVP. You're fading away into the background there. That was pretty cool. I was like, whoa, he's a ghost. Anyway, Joe Burrow, Jonathan Taylor, and then Justin Herbert. Out of the 5 guys, who's your MVP? Or do you have someone else? Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers, 4,115 yards, 37 touchdowns, 4 picks. Just unbelievable.
4 picks.
And once again, the number 1 seed in the NFC.
Yep.
Listen, it's hard to go against A-Rod, but Tom Brady, 44 years old, about to be 45, 5,300 yards, 43 touchdowns, 12 picks. Now, he had more weapons, I feel like, than Rodgers does all around. But
I agree with that.
I think it really comes down to those two. Joe Burrow, for what he did with Cincinnati, amazing. Justin Herbert, for what he is to the Chargers organization, especially if you watch that game on Sunday where he was 34-64 and just threw lasers. Tweeted out he was like a shark with a freaking laser view on his hand. And then Jonathan Taylor, 1,811 yards, 15 touchdowns, just incredible. I mean, this team, or this award, I'm going to go with just giving it to Aaron Rodgers. I'm with you.
Yeah,
I'll take over
let's
the
go.
next one because
All
it's
right.
Defensive Player of the Year. Defensive Player of the Year, I'm looking at what we got here. It really comes down to one player, and that's TJ Watt. TJ Watt was able to keep the Steelers single-handedly in football games. I mean, 22 and a half sacks ties Michael Strahan's record. Just incredible. I think he had 64 tackles combined. This guy is just a game changer. He missed a couple games or had injuries, rib injury, got kicked in the nuts right after tying the sack record. Incredible what he did. You look at the other guys who could be out there. Micah Parsons, amazing rookie. Myles Garrett for Cleveland Browns, 16 sacks, and single-handedly keeps that defense together. Trevon Diggs, who we absolutely love on this show. Anybody watched our NFL Draft 2020 show, we were ready for Diggs. After pick 15, everyone should have taken Diggs. That's how we went. And then the other guy I got is Robert Quinn. 18 and a half sacks, playing on that Chicago Bears defense. Incredible what he did for that team. And this is a guy who's had multiple 18-sack seasons. He does a great job. Doesn't get talked about a lot. He's made a lot of money. He does a good job. But it's TJ Watt. There's not a better defense player right now, possibly in football, than TJ Watt. TJ Watt has to be the defensive player of the year. And I'd like to go with Mike Parsons or someone like that, but it's not. It's TJ Watt. And let's bring Drew back in. Defense player of the year, who you like?
I'm with you, man. I'm with you. It's TJ Watt. And let's be clear. I believe he missed 2 games as well, right? So the numbers he put up, ridiculous. I just don't know how you can argue it. I mean, I really don't. He's just. I think it's a kind of a shoe-in unanimous deal.
I mentioned he single-handedly basically kept the Steelers in the playoffs this year.
Oh yeah, and keep in mind that's a team that's been playing from behind quite a bit, which means the other team is running the ball more often. So his opportunities, he certainly took advantage of.
Absolutely. And my other guys were Micah Parsons, Myles Garrett, Trevon Diggs, who is a definite show favorite, and Robert Quinn, who had 18 and a half sacks for the Bears. Anybody else you want to throw in as a possible Defensive Player of the Year candidate?
No, I think that's it. I mean, Trevon Diggs, numbers-wise, lots of interceptions. Also got worked a lot of the time.
He's
the boomer bust specialist.
Love it. And you know what? That guy's a ball hawk, and his kid's fantastic. I would love to have him on my team any day. Let's get on to Offensive Rookie of the Year, the O-Roy. Jamar Chase, Mac Jones, Kyle Pitts. I got Creed Humphrey on here for what he's done to really stabilize that offensive line in Kansas City. Rashawn Slater on here. And a guy who really picked it up the last few weeks who I had to put on here, Amon-Ra St. Brown for what he's done with your Detroit Lions. 90 catches, 912 yards, 5 touchdowns. Now you look at Chase, the numbers, 81 catches, 1,455 yards, 13 touchdowns. I think he's a shoo-in.
Yep.
Mac was pretty damn good. 3,801 yards, 22 touchdowns, 13 picks. You look at Kyle Pitts, and everyone wants to say, oh, Pitts had a great year. Great year. Look what he did. He broke the tight end, or he's over 1,000 yards, breaking Mike Ditka's record possibly. 68 catches, 1,026 yards. That's fine. But we started the year by saying we would know how good Kyle Pitts really was going to be based on what he did in the red zone. We both said he'd have over 6 touchdowns. 6 to 8, I think, is where we were looking. How many touchdowns did Kyle Pitts have this year? One touchdown.
I think to be honest with you, that's a Matt Ryan problem. Because think of it back to Julio. I mean, Julio didn't score. Julio couldn't score a touchdown at all 2 years ago. I mean, it comes down to when the field shrinks like that, then, yeah, Matt Ryan struggled. He's lost some velocity on the ball. Jamar Chase, for sure.
Yeah,
Jamar Chase is awesome. And I love Penei Sewell, and I love Rashawn Slater, but they probably made the right choice picking Jamar Chase. And I questioned it quite a bit in the draft night. I never questioned Jamar Chase. You and I were both huge on Jamar Chase.
I said he was T.O.
Yeah, regardless of the drops that like everybody was worried about. Like, I don't think that we were overly concerned about that. That just seems like so long ago. But yeah, Jamar Chase for sure.
Jamar Chase, absolutely incredible. And this is one of the few times where I think in the top of the draft you couldn't have gone wrong if you took, like you said, with Slater, Sewell, or whoever. But I mean, Creed Humphrey, obviously these offensive linemen aren't going to get looks, but don't overlook what Creed Humphrey's done in Kansas City to really stabilize that line, which everyone was worried about. We were worried about coming in. Could they win? Are they going to be any good? And he did a great job.
I think it was fair, right? I think it was fair to question that.
Let's move on. Defensive Rookie of the Year. I mean,
I think it's another easy one.
Micah Parsons
Yep.
My question coming out was, does he love football? We learned he
does.
loves football. Guy did everything. He
He
was awesome.
does.
13 sacks, 84 tackles. I mean, not only that, but the way he changed the mindset of the Dallas Cowboys. They were a defensive team down the stretch. And if you would have told me that the Cowboys were winning because of their defense down the stretch, you would have bet me $100. I would have dropped that $100 and I would have been like, all right, cool. Here you go. Can't argue it.
I agree. I mean,
the only other guy I got on this list is Patrick Surtain because he was pretty damn good there in Denver. But other than that, it's just Michael
and he
Parsons.
was, but Parsons was potential. I mean, he was on your defensive player of the year, not just rookie of the year,
changer,
right?
everything. I mean,
yeah. I mean,
if you're going to put a defensive guy on MVP, he could even be on there. That's how damn good he was as far as all around.
Yep.
Let's go to our last award here, Coach of the Year. These are the guys I got: Zach Taylor, the Hoodie, Mike Tomlin, John Harbaugh, Matt LaFleur, Mike Vrabel, Dan Campbell. Those are all guys, if I had votes, I would vote for the Coach of the Year. Who you got winning this?
Yeah, for me, this is also easy. It's Mike Vrabel, right? And the reason is think of they've gone through more players this year than any team I think ever, as far as COVID, injuries. You lost essentially your best player. Well, not essentially your best player.
Yeah.
For since week 8 or whatever it was.
Still finishes top 10 in rushing.
Yeah. And it's so and for them to have a bye, what Mike Vrabel and is the GM Robinson. I can't think of his name. John Robinson, I think.
John Robinson.
That tandem right there deserves whether it's GM of the year, front office of the year, and coach of the year, because again, to be able to put out the roster with AJ Brown nicked up all year, you lose Derrick Henry, you just kind of plug guys in and you continue to win football games. It was very impressive.
I know people are like, why are you putting John Harbaugh on here? They finished in last place in the AFC North. Look at how many guys
exactly same thing,
and how they were still in it that last game. Look at Mike Tomlin. Every year, this guy out. There is no reason this team should be in the NFL playoffs. None. And I fully expect them to get annihilated, but I know they won't. They're going to be in that game till maybe the end of the third quarter, even with Ben Roethlisberger throwing 2 yards out constantly. Where
he's terrible, dude.
I mean, it is hard to watch. And I would have rather had to see
the fact
that we
don't get Justin Herbert and instead we get Ben Roethlisberger is really a shame.
It is.
It's really is a shame. I mean, Ben Roethlisberger, dude, what was it, 2 weeks ago on Monday night, he threw 48 times for 120 yards.
Against the Browns.
He had
2.7 yards per
attempts at the break.
It's tough. And for TJ Watt and Mike Tomlin to do what they've done, insane.
Yeah, and Najee Harris had a good year, but Najee Harris also had over 200 carries. Yeah. And he had less than 1,000 yards. Yeah. So 202 carries, 929 yards. That is a boring ass offense to watch. So it's either Ben throwing 2-yard outs or you getting 2.5 yards a pop on the ground.
It was bad. And Tomlin, just excellent head coach. And we talk about it every time. And I hate doing it because I hate the Steelers. I'm sitting there watching that Steelers-Ravens game, and I'm just like, it'd be fantastic if the field just collapsed. No one gets hurt. It's just the field collapses. I mean, they can't finish it.
They just go away forever? They fall into a black hole?
Yeah, I mean, they can come back next year. I don't want to see them anymore. I didn't want anyone getting hurt.
No, that game was complete ass, dude. It was a terrible game to watch. I mean, Lamar Jackson doesn't get hurt. Baltimore makes the playoffs. It's that simple. I mean, Huntley was okay, but he's not Lamar Jackson. It was tough on them.
Who's giving up a second-round pick this year for Huntley? Someone's going to pony up something for Huntley this year.
But the thing is I think Huntley's skill set is perfect for what they do there, right?
It is.
To where you can't just plug him in anywhere. And so for me, it's the fact that Lamar Jackson went out, you lost back-to-back games of going for a 2-point conversion to win the game at the end of the game. Mm-hmm. I mean, really, everything went about as wrong as it could since Lamar Jackson went out. When before you hit a 66-yarder to beat the Lions, you were winning games that you probably shouldn't have. And that was kind of maybe the season catching back up to him. But Lamar Jackson getting hurt it was a tough scene.
How about the fact that the Steelers only got in because they tied the Lions? If they don't tie the Lions and they lose that game like they should have, They don't make the playoffs.
Yeah, we like to. We're very giving.
They're in like every playoff scenario had like because of the Lions in it. I'm like, how the hell does this happen? Look at you going on vacation, baby.
That's
I dig it. Palm trees in
I
paradise.
just teleported to Hawaii, so we're in good shape.
Matt
But
LaFleur, another guy who is getting overlooked because they're 13 wins.
Oh, I
3
agree.
years in a row, like 39 and 11 or 39 and 10.
Did you see Rogers say he was on Pat's show and he said if LaFleur called in his QB sneak on 3rd and 9, he's like, that shit ain't gonna happen. He's like, there's no way I'm running a QB sneak on 3rd.
That's like when he was on the Manning cast and he's like, yeah, I'm not sitting out. I'm playing on Sunday. Yeah. Like, and Peyton's like, well, what if Coach LaFleur says you're not? Well, I'm still going to go out there. But you see these guys have capability to do that. Look at Tom Brady going back out there when he wasn't supposed to get Gronk the catch. That got him his incentive to give Gronk a mill. Good for Gronk, whatever.
Bro caught it 1 yard out for a mill.
How nice is that? But, beautiful. I mean, for me, it's Zach Taylor, though, for what.
Wow, yeah.
Getting them into the playoffs and winning the AFC North when this was the only team who didn't make it last year. And everyone expected them to be.
They're awfully Jekyll and Hyde, dude.
They are.
The Bengals are awfully Jekyll and Hyde, and it leads me to believe that they're not going to be able to make like a deep run. Just because they had too many weeks where they just like didn't show up. But then, I mean, that game against the Chiefs was like a statement game, I think, from Joe Burrow. But yeah, absolutely. I can't argue that. It's just like when I think about the Bengals, I'm like, man, there's so much potential, but at some point in the playoffs, they're just going to lay an egg.
Yeah, probably because they're not fully there. They're probably a year ahead of where they should be.
And I don't think they're expected to be, right? I mean, Joe Burrow's coming off serious injury. Like,
but that's
most of the core is young. I mean, the fact that Joe Mixon, 1,200 yards on the ground this
Higgins, year. Chase, Burrow, Boyd. All under 25. Boyd is, 26? If they just get an offensive line and maybe another corner, maybe an impact linebacker, I mean, their edge guys are good now. They're a scary team. They are a scary football team, and it all starts with Burrow because Burrow, unbelievable year for him because not only did he lead the league in yards per attempt, but completion percentage. And those two don't go hand in hand unless you're really freaking good.
Yep.
Unless you're swinging it out there like Big Dick Nick. Let's move on to Executive of the Year. And I'm going to give this to the Hoodie. I'm not even going to go down a list. I think the Hoodie wins Executive of the Year based on what he did to rebuild that roster to be a damn good defense. They came off 7-9 last year with Cam running basically.
Terrible player. Cam is so shot, dude.
And let's bring up Cam for a second. This is what we do here. We go back to random things. Sam Darnold, you're like a yard out to run for a touchdown, and you're going to sneak with Sam Darnold when you got Cam Newton sitting there on the bench. What do you have Cam Newton on the roster for if you're not putting him in that situation?
It's a good feeling, dude. Stop being a dick. The people of Carolina, they had this nice – remember, he came back the first game. He played like 2 snaps. He threw 2 touchdowns. Everybody like, oh, Cam's back. Oh, he's going to start this week. Well, Cam is still terrible. But it's a feel-good story. Why do you hate feel-good stories? I just don't understand.
I wanted him to get that last touchdown.
It sounds like you hate a feel-good story.
I hate Sam Darnold. He's still not good. And if you're going to run a 1
he's a hell of a lot better than Cam Newton.
I mean, yeah.
No, dude, Cam Newton is so terrible.
Cam's bad now. But Sam Darnold just never been good. At least Cam was. And at least I know if I need a yard with a quarterback, there's maybe 2 guys I'd take in the league over him. Yeah, that's it. Cam. Right. Give me Cam.
I'm with
fullback.
Yeah, again, I'll go with John Robinson and what they did at Tennessee. I'll double up on that Tennessee love. Now, do I think they win the Super Bowl? No, I don't. But to be able to juggle as many things as they did and still get a bye in a very tough AFC, it's impressive. A
jam-packed AFC where 30 teams somehow still had a chance. Who you got right now? If we had to say it right now, who is your Super Bowl pick sitting here right now?
The 2 teams?
Yep.
I would say the Packers.
Okay.
And Kansas City. I think Kansas City's kind of just hitting things like they've started to get it right at the perfect time, I guess is the way I'll say it. There was some time there that didn't look great. And I mean, if it wasn't that, if it wasn't Green Bay, I'd lean towards the Buccaneers. But I think Green Bay is the team to beat. And Green Bay's getting healthy as well,
Yeah,
like right at
they
the
are.
Bakhtiari's back. And so I like Green Bay. Give me Green Bay and give me the Chiefs.
That'd be fun. I'm going to take Tampa and Tennessee.
Oh, so you're gonna ride with Rabes?
Hey, listen, if they can get anything out of Derrick Henry, where if you can just plug him in the fourth quarter of a game and he's rested and that foot's good enough, that is a scary monster to deal with when he's
Dante Foreman's been serviceable for
he's
them.
been serviceable.
Because he runs a lot like Derrick Henry. I mean,
Yeah.
I know he's not Derrick Henry, but he's a very north-south runner with likes to get his pads low and can kind of. I mean, he's running between the tackles. He's not an outside kind of guy, which is kind of fits the kind of zone scheme they like to run. As far as is with Derrick Henry.
There we go. There's our award season. Let's get into the game picks here. Let's do that. Let me pull up this thing here. Let me see what our records are. I am 121-59. Drew picked up another game on me, 123-57. We're going into the playoffs here. I don't have a lot of time. Looking ahead to the games we got 2 on Saturday, 3 on Sunday, 1 on Monday. And it's super wild card weekend. NFL is just throwing out money for this. They're so happy. They're getting all those advertising dollars. Each of the last 6 drafts have contributed a starting quarterback to this weekend's game, which is crazy to think. We're each one working it out. We can talk about that. 6 starting quarterbacks, not yet 27 years old. Based on that, crazy. We got some young kids, but then we got the old guard. You still got Brady. You still got Rodgers. I mean, Derek Carr, I feel like, is getting older every time he takes off his helmet. What's with him looking like the dude from Home Alone all of a sudden?
Look, dude, it's called age, man. Like the hairline recedes a little bit,
and he's not that damn old. Like,
no, I know.
His
hairline is not
what is going
recede.
On?
Like, right? Like he's not going to show up like Drew Brees with like a fresh top. Like it's not how it works, man.
Drew Brees and LeBron must have went to the same barber because their hairline came right back.
Yeah.
But we can talk about all that stuff. Let's just get into the games. We got Las Vegas at Cincinnati starting us off 4:35 kickoff on NBC, Peacock, and Universal for Españole. Who you got?
I'll take the Bengals in this one. Just being at home looks like it's gonna be a cold game, 27 degrees. I know I think the thing that I like about the Bengals is what I mentioned earlier, their ability to run and throw, and Joe Mixon's been really good. So give me the Bengals.
You got to run against this Raiders team because if you sit back there and pass, especially with this sketchy offensive line, Max Crosby, who I should have put on the Defensive Player of the Year list, based on the hurries he had, Max Crosby just incredible.
He had like almost double the hurries than the next guy.
Yeah, insane. He didn't always get to the quarterback, but he is an absolute game changer. Yannick Ngakoue, big-time player. I'm also going to take Cincinnati because I think they can run the football. I think you got to run draws. You got to run screens. You got to slow them down. But then when it comes down to it, listen, Jamar Chase is the game changer. There's not a corner I trust to stop him there. Give me Cincinnati. We're going to go to the nightcap. Mac Jones leading the charge of the Patriots into Buffalo to face Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. And nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills. We're going to get into that, or I sound like Batman instead of Berman. 8:15 kickoff, CBS and Paramount Plus for those streaming. Who you got?
All things say this game lines up for New England. It's going to be, I think,
0 degrees for high.
Yeah, 3 degrees, 0 degrees. It's
Oh,
going to be
bumped
cold.
up?
It's going to be cold. I have been on the Bills kind of bandwagon all year. I'll stick with it. I don't feel great about this game. I'll take the Bills. The line makes me uncomfortable.
What's the line sitting at right now?
4. Buffalo
In Orchard
-4.
Park.
Yeah, just Buffalo.
I think what sets us
really
up
great, dude. Like Buffalo, like recently, I know they won, but they haven't looked very good.
No. I think what sets us up for that 4-point spread is exactly what you have brought up all year, where you've been on Buffalo, but you've also stated over and over again they play like a dome team.
Mm-hmm.
And they do. And when I look at this, even though, Mac Jones looks like he hit that rookie wall, they proved already they don't need to pass a lot to beat Buffalo.
No. Did they beat him with throwing it 3 times?
Yeah. and
Yeah.
0 degrees. You're going to have to run the football. And yes, Devin Singletary has been better of late, but I still don't see him running it. And that defense is really good for Buffalo. I think this is going to be an ugly, 9-6 kind of game, sets up perfectly for just defense back and forth.
Sets up for Belichick.
And it sets up great for Josh Allen to get a late score, but it also sets up for Belichick to confuse him one time, get a J.C. Jackson interception. I'm going to take the Patriots on this one.
All right. There we go.
This is that really is the biggest toss-up for me right now.
Oh, for sure. I'm with you on it. I am.
We'll move on to the next game. NFC playoffs, 105 kickoff, Fox and Fox Deportes. Philadelphia, the number one running team in the NFL, against the number one passing team in the NFL and a great run defense in Tampa Bay, who just signed Vita Vea to a 4-year, $73 million extension.
Great move. Dude's
Tommy and the boys, he's a stud. And Tommy and the boys welcome Jalen Hurts in, and the team who finally realized they could run the football, and the defense has been playing better, but they got nobody to pass it to. Who you like in this one?
Yeah, I think Sirianni deserves some credit for potential coach of the year as well. I got to go with the Tampa Bay. Here's the thing: the Eagles, if you watch them closely, they're notoriously slow out of the gate. Mm-hmm. That's how they've been their MO for the last 8 weeks. The Buccaneers, however, a team that gets out and gets on it quick. I think if Tampa Bay gets up and it kind of neutralizes what the Eagles like to do offensively, give me Tampa at home.
I'm also going to take Tampa. I mean, for all the reasons you said. Moving on, NFC, San Francisco at Dallas. This is a game we're 40 years removed from from the catch in the corner, Joe Montana to Dwight Clark. We're 25 years removed from the time where they faced each other with 8 to 9 Hall of Famers on each side with Jerry Rice, Steve Young, Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith. I mean, those teams were loaded.
Remember when T.O. put it on the star?
Yep.
Oh, that was good stuff.
I mean, there's a lot of fun in this game, a lot of history. This is San Francisco at Dallas, 4:40 kickoff, CBS, Paramount Plus. Nickelodeon's got this game, so you can see the slime cannons for the touchdowns. Also on Amazon Prime Video. You can basically watch this one anywhere. San Francisco or Dallas, who you got?
San Francisco.
You got San Francisco. They are getting hot at the perfect time.
Yeah, and I just think that, Shanahan's just really good, man. And, what they've unlocked with Deebo Samuel, just, getting him the ball any way possible. And then Elijah Mitchell just kind of coming on. They've really created a nice little system offensively. Brandon Ayuk's been more involved recently. And the Cowboys have kind of been – I mean, I realize they put up a 50 burger 2 weeks ago, but they've been a little bit of kind of what the Bengals have been. To your point earlier, that the defense has kind of saved them. But I'll take the 49ers in this one on the road.
Listen, if I trusted Jimmy G, I'd be taking San Francisco. If I trusted Dak and the offense, I'd be taking Dallas. Problem is, that's a toss-up right now because Dak has not been great down the stretch. And you said they put up that 50 burger, but I mean, that was whatever. That was okay. One team is done for the year, and the other team still wanted to do something.
Wasn't it the Giants too? I think.
I thought it was Philly in the last game of the year or something. Okay. I don't know. It was one of the games. Yeah. Basically, it didn't matter, and they just were like, it was Philly because
50 burger on a division opponent is a flex.
But I mean, it's hey, they're playing backups. It's a preseason game. It's like Browns-Bengals last week where people are like, look how good Case Keenum looked. That was a goddamn preseason game, you fools. Anyway, I won't get into that because I've ripped Browns fans enough this week because I don't like a lot of Browns fans because I think they're – yeah. But anyway. So 90% of my Twitter followers are Browns fans, so I expect to have 7 Twitter followers by the end of the show. Anyway, I'm going to take Dallas. What the hell?
All right.
Pittsburgh at Kansas City. This is our primetime Sunday night football. Slide into your screen and watch this one. NBC, Peacock, and Telemundo. Aquí es Telemundo. Football de Americano. Who do you got? Pittsburgh or Kansas City?
Kansas City.
Yeah.
Kansas City. I do think Pittsburgh keeps it closer than
most people spread on this one.
It's in the uncomfortable range for me. It's 12.5.
Oof. Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I said it earlier. Pittsburgh's going to keep this closer because that's how good Mike Tomlin coaches, and TJ Watt's been a stud. And I think it ends up at maybe a 10-point game, but I think it's going to be tight going into the fourth quarter. It'll be interesting. because I don't know how the hell they even score points, but they do.
I know.
Makes no sense. And our final one for Super Wild Card Weekend. It is the Arizona Cardinals at the Los Angeles Rams. Matt Stafford, Kyler Murray. Are you going with your Arizona Cardinals in this one?
Yes, absolutely. Matt Stafford doesn't win playoff games.
You know,
by the way, Matt Stafford's been somewhat erratic as of late.
Before they acquired Odell Beckham Jr., his QB rating was like 108. Since acquiring Odell Beckham Jr., his quarterback rating has dropped to 93.7.
In fairness, I think OBJ has actually been a good signing for them.
He's been solid, yes.
I do. But I'm going with my Cardinals. Hey, I brought him to the dance. I'm not ditching him for the hotter chick and my old girlfriend, Matt Stafford.
It's adorable. I like that. It works. But the crazy thing about this weekend is I'm going to take the Rams. And Matt Stafford's going to get a playoff victory. The Bengals are going to get a playoff victory for the first time since before we had cell phones. Like 92, we're talking, since the last time they won a playoff game.
I would listen. I mean, I still like Matt Stafford, right?
I know you do. I know you still have feelings for your ex.
And it's a weird situation just because it's like it's hard to root for them, knowing like them losing puts us in a better position, I guess, essentially. But I would love to see Matt Stafford win a playoff game.
Low 20s better than that mid 20s to high 20s pick.
It's true.
I think this game has capability to be a lot of fun. It really does. And I'm interested to see it. I think this is way more exciting than Pittsburgh, Kansas City as a primetime game. What's your game of the weekend? What one are you really expecting just to be the best game of the weekend?
Probably that one, to be honest with you. I mean, I think that both offenses are kind of high powered. It's going to be perfect conditions being at SoFi. It's also interesting that last week the Rams had like 0 fans. You would hope that.
I mean, that interception Staff threw at the end of the game, and it was booming loud cheers. I'm like,
yeah. So I mean, I don't know if it's any real advantage to play at SoFi. I do think it's a kind of an up and down game, and it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it should be interesting. It's going to be a fun game. There's a lot of really good games this weekend. I'm excited for them. Before we finish up tonight, we got to get to the number one segment on the show. Drew's Ward's Wagers, 35-21 against the spread this season. What do you got for us this week?
Yeah, so I think I'm going to go tread somewhat lightly this week. So I will take Cincinnati minus the 5.5. I think they win by a touchdown. That 12.5 there in Arrowhead just makes me too uncomfortable. I'm not touching that one. 8.5. I will take. All right, so I'll take the Bengals minus 5.5. I will take the 49ers plus 3, and I will take the Cardinals plus 4.
Sticking with your Cardinals, I like that. That's 3. Like, I'm gonna tread lightly, but then you go right back to your. That's your normal 3, baby. I like.
I mean, the other two lines are just weird numbers. Like 12.5 is just a weird number. 8.5 is an extremely weird number. I can't touch those two games. But and really the Buffalo game is interesting. I just don't have a good enough beat on that one. I really do think the Patriots could run the ball, and kind of potentially put it to the Bills. But I'll still roll with the Bills.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of good games this weekend. I look for you to go 3-0 in this.
Where are you at there, dude?
Some crazy bar. I'm like, I'm going to switch mine up while you're talking, see what happens. And
it
just looks like sitting this way, it just pixelated it all together.
Yeah, it looks like I don't really know what it looks like, to be honest with you. But
let's switch out. Let's just go with the logo.
There you go.
Rock the logo behind me here. And, brother, anything else you want to get into tonight?
No, man. I'm look forward to hopping on next week and talking about round 2, I guess.
It's gonna be exciting. And, we
not super wild card.
We didn't really bring up Dan Campbell a lot when we were talking Coach of the Year, but I did tease that we're going to talk about him. I didn't want to bring him up during Coach of the Year because, listen, we looked at this team as a team that they were really bad coming into the season. Maybe a 1-win team. You thought maybe 2. I mean, but
for a while there, it looked like they might not win no games.
Yeah. But the amazing thing about what this team did this year for your team is you guys won, 3 games? It was?
3.5.
3.5. You won 3.5 games.
Discredit that half game.
Yeah. that got the Pittsburgh Steelers into the playoffs. Fucking shit. But
Damn it, Lions.
they did it. And the amazing thing is, though, for Detroit, looking at what's going forward, you actually can be excited about what's going forward with 3.5 wins. And the fact that your team was in every single game. They were maybe not in it score-wise, but that team fought for Dan Campbell. And I think Dan Campbell did a hell of a job.
Yeah,
with
and I think Brad
Detroit Lions
Holmes
football
deserves
team.
credit too. I mean, Penei Sewell was one of the best tackles, not just as a rookie in the league. And you got to take into account he switched from right tackle to left tackle. When Taylor Decker came back, he switched back to right tackle. And then to hit a player like Amon-Ra St. Brown, who you list off his numbers, he had over 900 yards, but like you have to take into account, like up until week 10, he really didn't do anything.
Nope.
And so you get a player like that in the 4th round. You add in a couple, first round picks this year. Yeah, there's definitely reasons to be optimistic, I guess. I would say.
There's absolutely
Dan
reason to be
Campbell,
optimistic.
he laid his nuts on the table, dude. Like he understood his team was overmatched pretty much every given week. And so he hit him with trickery. He went for his, the most 4th downs in the entire league. So he definitely, I was impressed with what he did. I thought when he took over play calling, it could have essentially went terribly.
Yep.
Right? Because
especially taken away from Anthony Lynn, who was a big reason we were psyched about that offense, what he could do with it.
And it was the right call. And so definitely credit to him. And that was big because he got a lot of shit heading into the year with the press conference and biting people's kneecaps. And like people think he's just a huge meathead, but I do think he has potential. And I think he's also surrounded himself with a nice coaching staff. And Aaron Glenn did a fantastic job in the defensive unit. And that's really a depleted defensive unit that doesn't have a lot of talent. So once you add some talent in the draft, hopefully you get it, one of the edge rushers. I'm sure we'll get into that in the upcoming weeks here rather. But yeah, definitely a reason to be optimistic. And Dan Campbell, I'm very, very excited about.
Nice future there in Detroit. Hopefully the same coming in Cleveland. We'll see going into next year. So much to talk about coming up here. We got all kinds of fun stuff. We're going to talk playoffs. We're going to get into the draft because we got to have that Aiden Hutchinson, Kayvon Thibodeau talk about who is the better edge defender. And I don't think either one is the number 1 overall pick right now. And who do I think that'll be?
Neil.
Well, that's why you're going to have to stick around. We're going to have to watch. This is the Full Coverage Football Show, ladies and gentlemen. We are live every Wednesday, 8 p.m. You can find us on Twitter. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on our Facebook page, fb.me/FCFSpod. Follow me on Twitter at SomervilleCLE. Follow Drew at DetroitDave7. Make sure you call him Dave constantly, even though we call him Drew on here. Enjoy it. And hey, if you need your golf swing fixed, that's the man you talk to over there. Also, Monday night, the Approach Pod, Fanshare Sports, I believe it is. What time does that show start usually? 7:30?
7:30. Yep.
7:30. Check that out. You can find him on Twitter at DetroitDave7. Check it out there. Easiest way to do it. And as always, remember, we will be back next week. And if you live the life you love, you'll love the life you live. Night, kids. And now we wait.